Hello viewers, so it's near the end of the season, so I thought that I would go ahead and give a sneak peek of different gardening ideas and issues that maybe a beginner gardener would be facing. This is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, so we're zone 3 about, A or B, if you're looking at climate zones. So I'm just starting out on our patio. Just a couple things up here. So first of all, went ahead and did a planter this year. Now we were having some issues with wind, so I went ahead and put up some cloth just to prevent some of that wind from coming onto the patio because it was knocking over some things. So I'm just enjoying my morning coffee here, but we'll take a stroll down to take a peek on some other things. So there you can see some more cloth that I just put up. Just to prevent some more of that sun, or sorry, the wind. So first off, we have some of our herbs. Now the herbs did not do very well this year. Now I think that part of that is the type of soil that I was using as a medium. So the lemongrass looks good, but a lot of these others not so much. So I'm in the process of making a shed, so that's what we have at the bottom there. But so for example, the cilantro, it definitely has been too hot, not enough water. It's completely bolted and had never really given much for produce either. The basil's doing a little bit better, but you can see even some of these other things like the parsley or thyme is not doing so great. So have to maybe try a different medium next year. This year I added in some ferns here, possibly too sunny of a spot. So make sure that you are making a sun map and able to determine how many hours of sun something is getting. I believe that this was just also not conditioned properly. So the person that I bought it from had it in a much shadier spot. But it got some new leaves and those have also burnt out. So I was gone for a time, so maybe they weren't getting enough water from the person that was looking after it. So we're waiting to see how that comes back. But over here you can see there's again some new fern leaves coming. So it might not be the best spot for them, we'll see. And a hosta that's coming in quite nicely. And again, this is probably about 3 hours of sun. I did make a sun map at the beginning of the season because this was a new year at this property. So I'm also trying to convert some of our yard into a food forest. So we have here a start of a plum tree and a currant below it. And the idea with a food forest is we have different levels. So I have here some lily of the valley that I'm hoping to kind of fill in the spots underneath, which will then also give just some ground cover to prevent some weeds. And then we have some bee balm here, so that's to attract some pollinators. And then the currant for a bush underneath. So for the most part this year, it was kind of just what I could get my hands on at a reasonable price. But the idea is later that this whole side where the fence is will be other types of produce or medicinal or just beneficial plants. So the bee balm, if you've never had it, it does smell a lot like oregano. It's actually really nice. If we come over here, so again, continuing with this idea of eventually a food forest, I put in 6 haskap. So you can see each of these spots here. A note when you are putting in bushes or trees to try to relax the root ball if it's possibly overgrown. These ones were not, they're so small. The tree itself, I was able to just untangle the roots really quite easily, but perhaps if you have a different one, you might actually want to go ahead and look at cutting that. Also, you want to be backfilling those holes with something close to the soil that is surrounding it. So I think I may have actually added in too much compost. So really research that, check if you should be composting or not. And then I have a couple of grapes here. I don't think they're doing so great. This is again first year that I have them. And we do have a few grapes being produced, but they just don't seem to be thriving. These are about the same size that they were when I planted them or when I bought them. And then this year we put in a side flower garden around the fence here. So just a flower bed. I just recently added in some lavender. And then it's later in the season again, so the lilies are quite spent. But it's always important to be checking in on everything. So this year I had some red lily beetles, and again I was gone for quite a while, so they ended up kind of getting out of control, and you can actually see one just, that's not that guy, but right there. So I haven't yet come out this morning, so I'll grab my gloves and I'll just actually squish him. So you want to really be watching, because I do think that this will come back next year, but obviously they don't look that great. So keeping an eye on what you're growing and identifying what the pests are and trying to get a handle on those. So I really do try to be pesticide free, so that's why I'm just squishing them, and it was fine until I had left, and then the person looking after them wasn't squishing them, so they got a little bit out of control. So these were some more lilies. They never bloomed this year just because they are fairly new bulbs. They just I only had one lily bulb last year, and so those are all the new pieces. And yes, just some more things. And now I do have some bird feeders. So we have some peanuts and then a bigger one there. So all of these sunflowers are actually just from the bird feeder itself, just things that have fallen on the ground and have taken root. So that's what this guy is doing here. And then we have some succulents and some ground cover. So this is actually just from a family member that has given me some, and they've filled in here nicely. So making sure you're keeping aware of that. And now, so I do have a bird bath here because, again, I'm trying to attract the birds, particularly for keeping pests away. So making sure that you do have some water so that they don't go after your actual garden. Now, again, I was away, so a lot of my plants aren't the best in the planters. So I would give some suggestions, like maybe moving them out of the sun when you know it's going to be a hot time of year. So for example, my potatoes here, those are pretty much spent, and I'm gonna be digging. I already dug up a few, but I'll take out some more. But some other potatoes over here, and I was using some wine bottles just to keep some extra water in when I could. I haven't watered yet this morning though, so they're not looking too great, still a little dry. And then also some Saskatoon berry bushes here. Now again, it's the start of a new landscape for us, so trying to get everything in as early as you can, because a lot of those are they can take 2 to 5 years to actually produce much. So you want to be trying to put in your bushes and trees as soon as possible. Another note with the bushes and trees is you have to be careful. So for example, my plum, I was going to put it south facing, but apparently, especially in Saskatchewan, we can have a late frost and then you end up killing your flowers and not getting any fruit. So I have it on an east facing side that gets a decent amount of sun still. So we have some different vines here. We have some honeysuckle walking in. So my compost, I have decided to just put in weeds in this compost. So this is, quote, my dirty compost. So the idea is that I can eventually put these in different holes, like if I'm digging for a tree. I really try to not put in anything with seeds, but obviously this last time I wasn't as careful. So I would say that anything that's going to seed, maybe you want to take out of your compost, not put it in. Otherwise, weeds can often go in. And the idea is that as long as it gets heated enough, then you'll be good. Now, I planted some different flowers here. Now you can see how the beetles, the flea beetles, have really just went ahead and gotten going here. They were on my radishes and things, and I wasn't too concerned, but they're just really, they are taking over. So this is where something like some powder, or I've also heard a shot vac to suck them up and then kill them in just some water. But for the most part, I don't know, if something dies, I'm not too concerned, but again, it's good to stay on top of things before they become a problem. Now here we have our tomatoes. So I definitely maybe planted these too close this year. I was trimming them because a lot of these are indeterminate. So I was pruning different suckers, but again, I was away for quite a few weeks, so nobody was going ahead and pruning them. Now we're getting to the end of our season, so it might be a good idea to go ahead and take off the tops of some of these. So I have done a few, just up to the last flower, but even then, I'm not sure if all the flowers will have time to produce. But I'm gonna have a lot of vegetables anyway, but so probably going to want to be at the point where I'm really heavily pruning to make sure that the things that are growing actually do come to full harvest. So I have here an archway, so I put some peas on this side, which are growing up, but I also have a tomato coming through there from the other side. So I've already harvested a decent amount off of the peas. Again, the sunflower here, he just kind of popped up. He wasn't supposed to be here, and I wasn't here to pull him, so that's okay. Down here we have some zucchini. So really want to be hand, what is that called? Hand pollinating, if you can, with different squashes, because they are not always tremendously successful. So I did do some hand pollinating. It looks like some other flowers have popped up that I could do it again. So double checking to research which are the female and male flowers, and I was using the paintbrush method. Now I'm trying to tie these up so that we can make sure that we're not getting too much moisture down here, and I have pruned some of these leaves underneath the zucchini. So those are hollow, so they are not actually doing much for photosynthesis. So I went ahead and did that, because otherwise you get these white spots, and I'm getting some of that happening. So luckily my zucchini are quite far in their process, so it's not a big issue because they'll still be able to continue growing, but maybe not so much with some of the newer plants that are coming along. And so in this pot I also put some clematis, so that was actually from root, or kind of from seed, so I'm quite happy with those. I planted some small rose bush, viney rose bush, so that's coming out right here, so it's having a good time mostly. And again, we have some cauliflower. So I definitely had some issues with the moths this time. Cabbage moths, I believe, is what these holes are from. Not sure if these will produce, but I figured I would just take a couple. Now I did use companion planting. So the cauliflower over here, my broccoli is way on the other side of the garden because they do not want to be next to each other. I already pulled some turnips, so that's where these were. Some more zucchini in the back. Now they're not doing as great as the others. We have some carrots here, so I've only pulled one carrot, but otherwise they are ready to go. And the reason why I haven't pulled them is I'm just not ready to process them yet. So they will keep in the ground a lot later, but I will have to cut off the top because those are not looking the best. I just planted some peppermint. Now, again, this is later in the season, so I was trying to be conscious of where I'm planting these herbs, so for companion planting, but where I have something this year might not be where I have it next year. So it is a little bit tricky. So trying to plant something that I can either move, and with the peppermint, because it is so intrusive, I did actually plant it in a pot with the bottom actually taken out. That way it's not going to be growing and spreading in my garden. It will a little bit in the pot because it was smaller than the actual pot itself, but that's okay. I'll just get some more. Here I have my lettuce that I have not pulled. So I should have been eating it a long time ago. And right now I'm just letting it go until I figure out what to do with it. I have a couple of rows of onions. Most have fallen over themselves, but I am going through and breaking off a couple more. And we'll be pulling those and drying those soon. Now my beets, I had the birds eating them at the start of the season. So that's something that you might want to be covering. And then when I replanted, I actually put this mill here, this wooden thing, so then it's actually moving and scaring the birds away. So I was able to get a few more to pop up here. Now, another note with the garden is that I have been putting mulch. So been mulching the paths, putting wood down underneath because this is a no-till garden, so I'm not bringing up the ground at all. So I'm trying to make sure it's not compact. You can see a little bee on my sage there. So where in between the rows, I've put a lot of leaves and then grass clippings, and then some chop and drop. So those were some, was it radish leaves? I don't quite remember. Oh, the zucchini leaves that I put down. Just things to make sure that the moisture stays in the ground and that if a weed comes, then they're not necessarily getting planted. So here we do have some weeds that have taken root. So, but again, that's pretty minimal for me not actually really weeding much here. Usually when I do go ahead and weed, it's usually right alongside where something is planted. So for example, I needed to weed along the beets. So here's a little guy, and you can see some other smaller ones that are just beside. So it's a much smaller job if you're mulching properly. I wish that I would have went through and added some straw as well, because that would have been a good one to add as an organic mulch. So this was supposed to be a bit of a keyhole spot here, so that I can either access it through these tomatoes or step over my peas to get into the middle. And so you can see that there's actually 2 rows. So I was supposed to be able to go around in between these, but they've all grown in. So there was kind of a 2 keyhole setup because that side over there is just a complete tomato. But that's okay. And so another thing with setting this up is the wind. So I was purposely putting those Saskatoon bushes there because I'm trying to create a bit more of a wind block, because at the start of the season it was just tremendously windy. I have a bit of a wind tunnel coming from the north and south through my yard here. So because of the wind issues at the start of the season, I did put up just anything that I had extra on hand. So here's I don't even know what it is. It was left here from another tenant. Just a piece of plastic siding or something. So that's up there, and I did some mounds of mulch or compost to again just create a little bit more of a wind shelter. On some of my tomatoes, I cut out the bottom and put them in the cage at the start of the season, just again to prevent some of the wind from knocking them over. And here you can see a little bit more of the produce happening. So we'll get a big yield from that. Marigolds I'm putting throughout because those are good at deterring pests. So these are all of my potatoes, which have flowered and are probably ready to go. I've been hilling some for those, again hilling just to make sure that they don't actually get exposed to the sun. And because I have so many potatoes here, that's another reason why I put them in the pots. My pepper, this was one of the few things that I bought from the greenhouse rather than starting from seed, and that has not done well this year. So maybe we'll try again next year. Pumpkins, I'll get to that, but I can see a bit more on this side. Now pumpkins, they will just keep spreading. So you can see here, this is about 15 feet long now, and I have one pumpkin growing there, another here, and then a large one happening over there. So luckily I have that space there that it's kind of growing out, but I actually want to do something with that space in the long run because I have just so many weeds growing there, and that's what's coming into my garden. So I actually went ahead and just laid down some cardboard right along the edge of the garden in this gravel pit because there were so many weeds when I was gone, and I had to weed kind of right in this corner because there were so many weeds coming in. Now at the start of the season I was trying to be very diligent with just pulling anything that was going to flower so that the seeds weren't blowing in, but it's hard to always stay on top of it. So going to definitely do something, thinking about a greenhouse in that space, and then maybe just putting something else in another spot so that it again just smothers out any weeds that might be developing. But you can see that the actual pumpkin is starting there and it's growing all the way over there. So it's good to have some of that space. Now here we have the cucumbers. Now the cucumbers that the first set did not take, so I need to replant them. So they're not that far along, but I'm trying a trellis system here. Somebody else said that if you use the right string, then you can just compost everything. Go ahead and cut it all. Probably won't be able to compost this, but you can see that I've went ahead and kind of moved my cucumber leaves around it so that it is growing up, because when I got home, it was just kind of all flopping over. And we do have a few cucumbers growing, so that's nice to see. But yes, if you're running out of space, trellising and growing upwards is always a good idea. Now this marigold I grew from seed. It's only just now blooming. Now I actually started it quite early, probably in May, and so either just not the correct soil again for when I planted that seed. Also, it was not warm temperatures so when I transplanted, so I don't think that that was helping at all. It took a long time for it to keep growing once I did transplant it, so that's something that maybe the greenhouse can help with. And yeah, also just making sure you have the right conditions. So again, when you're starting something from seed, you want to make sure that yes, the medium that you're planting in is good, the temperature, the moisture, and the light. So I did get some additional artificial lights, but again, it wasn't as quickly as I had hoped. So again, you can see some more produce there. Now I went ahead and did some staking because these were kind of growing into the path here. So just kind of pulling some of that back. Now because I have so many tomato plants, I tried some different techniques. So here I'm doing chicken wire with some bamboo sticks. And I think for the space given that I was trying to really compact things in, I think it has worked well. I was able to get underneath to do some weeding when I needed to. I just kind of push against it when I'm watering so that I can actually get the water in there. Now the only thing that I'm a little concerned about is actually grabbing anything when I do go to harvest. So that might pose a bit of a problem, but I'm kind of planning on just going in through the top, or I can open it. So for example, this one is open on the one side. Let's see if I can pull back here. There I have some protection from the wind again, just some old siding, and the chicken wire is open on this side, so it's kind of spilling out here, but I can really access it a lot easier going through. Now this was also built from a previous owner, again for wind protection. So I used this for my watermelon, but it wasn't soon enough. A lot of them were just not doing well. Probably won't get much from these guys this year, but we'll see. I had to replant them. From our university here, I bought some strawberries, about 30 strawberry plants. So these are all quite young, but the idea is that hopefully they'll last over the winter and I'll have a really great strawberry patch. I have a few more to show you. And then again, companion planting, it's really good to have those against the chives. So I've kind of made chives as a border here on both sides. I haven't been taking much for the chives, but I'm hoping to freeze those over the winter. More strawberries in the front. Again, trying to mulch a lot around them. And then these couple of strawberries were from the greenhouse, so those are actually producing now. And I bought a couple of varieties, again, just trying to try some new things, see what works. And each variety kind of has a different pro or con. Here we have our bush beans. Now for some reason my particularly the yellow ones did not do very well this year, so I only have a couple of plants of those, and I did actually replant them once already. And then the green beans here, so I did kind of try to do a bit of a trellis here, but they are bush beans, they're not vine beans, so they're not growing up. But yes, there you can see that they are producing.